Earlier this morning, we gathered with a group of young men. In this case, it happened to be all boys in the solemn communion class that was preparing to deepen their understanding of their communion, their communication with Jesus the Lord. And I told them a story from when I was about their age, when I was a boy and was delivering newspapers. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have Google. They didn't actually barely had TV. People were just starting to get televisions in their homes. People had radios. And newspapers were a fixture. Most communities had paper boys, and your job was to get 2 deliveries out every day. You took out the morning paper, and it had to be crisply placed there at the front step. If it was raining, it could not be wet. It had to be right there. And then that way, when people got up in the morning, it had to be early, so that if they wanted the news first thing, they could go out and there it was, their morning news. And then in the afternoon, you took around the evening news, late afternoon, so that at the close of the day, the work day, people could have an update and get the evening news. And so, as you did that, you were in this great responsible position of being the provider. You were the internet, you know? And so you're getting the news out to people. And I remember learning from many different people as a boy this saying: don't believe everything you read. How many of you ever heard that? And then I came across a saying by Mark Twain: if you do not read the newspaper, you are uninformed. If you do read the newspaper, you are misinformed. That was a long time ago that he said that. And it doesn't necessarily imply any malice of intent. It can be there too, but really, human beings just don't know everything. And we don't have access to all the information about anything. And so any reporting we do, any news that we share or create is limited. Can't help it. And of course, we have our kind of lens on of how we see things. It's unavoidable. And so any kind of news that's written down, that's out in the internet, that's anywhere in any form, don't believe everything that you read. Everything in a certain sense coming from human beings is misinformation. And whenever we're confronted with that, we kind of have to ask, well, to whom do we listen? Where do you go with this? And so I told the young lads that one place where I think they should really listen is they should listen to their parents. Not because their parents know everything. Their parents don't know everything. And not because their parents might not really understand everything, but because their parents have much, much more experience than they do. And their parents' main qualification, their parents love them and care about them and want them to grow and thrive and be well. And so as time goes on, they'll have more and more opportunity to make their own decisions and come to their own thoughts. But at their age, listen to people who love you. Listen to your parents. And today we hear from Peter and James and John. I say we hear from them because they were with Jesus. And they wanted this story to be known. Jesus said, don't tell until after I'm resurrected. And so apparently they did spread the news after he was resurrected. that they were with Jesus, and he was bright shining with the glory of God. It was dazzling. And in that presence with Jesus and the presence of God, they heard clearly, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." And as we begin now to get ready to enter the season of Lent, we hear that message every year from one of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, or Luke. We hear this story and we hear this message. "This is my Son. Listen to him." It is more than human information, says Peter, James, and John. It's got a breadth and a depth and a truth to it that we cannot find in human news and human information. And I've been working with this message in a very conscious, deliberate way for well over 40 years, pushing on toward almost 50 years. And I've often found when I listen to him, to Jesus, sometimes I don't like what he says. Sometimes I don't understand what he says. Sometimes what he says I understand all too well. And I find it very, very hard to hear or to do. And sometimes his words are just an instant blessing and consolation. It's an interesting conversation to listen to him. But I will say that in this tiny little speck of time, 40-some years, I've never found misinformation. Things that I didn't understand, maybe 10, 20 years later, open up and I go, "Oh, that's the truth." And the things that I don't want to hear, I eventually realize I do need to hear. And it's not just me. People have been putting his words to the test for 2,000 years. Generation after generation after generation. And people find his words, not other people's words about him, his words, as conveyed to us through the Gospels, that human medium, but his words conveyed to us there are faithful. They've been tested and tested and tested, and they persevere. And their beauty and their strength endures. And they say the things we need to know. And he loves us. And he wants us to thrive and to grow and have a life that is unimaginably great, beginning now and never ending. He is worthy of our ears, of our hearts, of our minds. And so, as we come for Holy Communion, let's remember that communion is communication. Communion is being together and listening to one another. So this Lent, review your plan. Do you have a way to listen to Jesus' words in the morning and Jesus' words in the evening? Even if it's only for 1 minute, we need to listen to him. Thanks be to God.